Captain Dong-min Park stood on the bridge of the New Seoul and watched the massive space station grow larger on the screen. This was humanity's first meeting with the Galactic Consortium. After 200 years of dreaming about aliens, humans had finally built ships fast enough to reach the stars. Now they were about to meet the beings who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. The space station was bigger than any city on Earth. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its ports. Some looked like metal flowers, others like crystal spears. The human ship looked simple and rough next to them. "Captain, we are getting a message," said Lieutenant Minho at the communications desk. "Put it on screen," Dong-min said. A tall, graceful being appeared. Its skin was pale blue and its eyes were large and silver. It wore robes that seemed to flow like water. This was Ambassador Kaelvex of the Vallani people. "Welcome, humans of Earth," the ambassador said. Its voice was musical but cold. "I am here to guide you through the proper procedures for new species. Please follow our escort ships to Docking Bay 7. Dong-min had expected more excitement. The first meeting between humans and aliens was supposed to be historic. Instead, it felt like checking into a hotel. The docking bay was enormous. Hundreds of beings moved around, loading cargo and repairing ships. They looked at the human ship with mild interest, then went back to work. Dong-min and his team walked through corridors filled with creatures he had never imagined. Some had fur, others had scales. Some floated, others crawled. But none of them seemed very interested in the new humans. Ambassador Kaelvex met them in a large room with windows showing the stars. "Please sit," it said, pointing to chairs that adjusted to human size. "We have prepared documents for you to review. Trade agreements, territory assignments, and basic laws you must follow." Dr. Haewon Kim, the ship's chief scientist, leaned forward. "We brought gifts from Earth, music, art, and information about our culture." The ambassador smiled, but it did not reach its eyes. "How thoughtful. We will add them to the cultural database. Now about the mining rights to the Kepler system." For 3 days, they talked about rules and regulations. Humans could mine certain asteroids. They could trade basic metals and organic compounds. They could settle on a few empty worlds that nobody else wanted. It was not the grand welcome Dong-min had hoped for. Then everything changed. Dong-min was eating breakfast when alarms started blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors. Ambassador Kaelvex burst into their meeting room, its calm face now filled with fear. "There is an emergency," it said. "A plague has appeared on 3 worlds. We need to evacuate immediately." "What kind of plague?" Dr. Kim asked. The ambassador's silver eyes were wide. "Something we have never seen. It turns living beings into empty shells. They walk around, but they are not alive anymore. Our best doctors cannot stop it." Within hours, reports came from across the galaxy. The Gray Death, as people started calling it, was spreading faster than ships could travel. Entire cities became filled with walking corpses. The plague did not kill. It just took away everything that made someone alive. They could still move and breathe, but their minds were gone. Dr. Kim worked day and night in the station's medical bay. She studied samples from infected worlds while consortium doctors tried their advanced treatments. Nothing worked. Quantum healing chambers failed. Genetic repair technology made things worse. Medicine that could regrow limbs could not touch the Gray Death. "It is impossible," said Dr. Velkan, the consortium's chief medical officer. "This plague attacks the connection between mind and body. Our technology cannot even detect how it works." Weeks passed. Billions died on dozens of worlds. The proud consortium begged for help from species they had never contacted before. Nothing worked. The Gray Death continued to spread. Dr. Kim made a discovery that changed everything. "The plague is not natural," she told the emergency council. "Someone made it. It was designed to be the perfect weapon against advanced civilizations." "Who would do such a thing?" Ambassador Kaelvex asked. "A species that knew they were going to lose a war," Dr. Kim said. "They created this as revenge. It targets the quantum structures that advanced species use to enhance their biology. Humans never developed that technology, so we are immune." The room fell silent. Dr. Velkan spoke first. "You mean your primitive biology protects you?" Dr. Kim nodded. "But there is more. I think I can create a cure. However, it requires human genetic material. A lot of it. And the process will change us permanently." She explained her plan. The cure needed to be grown inside living human cells. It would require volunteers from every human colony. The process would shorten human lifespans by decades and make permanent changes to their biology. Children born after the treatment would be different from their parents. How many humans would need to participate? Dongmin asked. All of them, Dr. Kim said quietly. Every human in space. And most of the people on Earth. The cure needs genetic diversity to work against all variants of the plague. The consortium offered humanity everything they could imagine. Star maps to 1,000 worlds. Technology that could make Earth a paradise. Membership as equals in galactic civilization. All they asked for was the cure. Dongmin called Earth. He talked to presidents and scientists and ordinary people. The choice was simple but terrible. Humanity could save the galaxy, but they would pay a price that would affect their children and their children's children. Earth voted yes. Dr. Kim worked with volunteers from every human colony. They gave blood and tissue samples. They allowed alien machines to change their genetic code. They watched their hair turn gray and their bodies age as the cure took shape in hidden laboratories. The cure worked. Within months, the walking dead began to wake up. The plague stopped spreading. Trillions of lives were saved across hundreds of worlds. The galaxy celebrated. Parades filled the streets of alien cities. Consortium leaders gave speeches about friendship and cooperation. They called humans heroes and promised they would never be forgotten. But as Dongmin stood in his aging body and watched the celebrations, he wondered if promises made during disasters would be kept during peaceful times. The consortium had saved their civilization, but humanity had paid the price. He hoped the galaxy would remember that when the fear was gone and life returned to normal. Dr. Kim lived long enough to see the last of the plague victims recover. She died young like many of the volunteers, but she died knowing that humanity had done something incredible. They had saved the galaxy at the cost of their own future. The question now was whether anyone would remember. Commander Jin-Woo Lee walked through the mining station and tried not to think about his father's stories. 50 years had passed since the Grey Death and the galaxy had moved on. His father had been one of the volunteers who gave their genetic material to create the cure. He died young like most of his generation, but he always told Jin-Woo that it was worth it. The mining station orbited a dead planet in the outer rim. Most of the workers were human, pulling rare metals from asteroids while consortium ships carried the profits to richer worlds. This was what humanity had become. Useful workers who did dangerous jobs that nobody else wanted. Jin-Woo commanded the security forces on the station. It was not an important job, but it was better than working in the mines. He had trained at consortium military academies and served on their ships. He knew he was good at his job, but he also knew he would never command a real warship. Those positions were for species that mattered. "Commander, we have a problem," said Sergeant Kyung-ho at the communications desk. "The new workers from Earth are asking questions about the Grey Death again." Jin-Woo sighed. New arrivals always asked about the plague. They had heard stories from their grandparents about humanity's great sacrifice. But when they looked for information in the consortium databases, they found almost nothing. What kind of questions? They want to know why there are no records of human involvement in developing the cure. They found an old document that mentioned Dr. Haewon Kim, but when they searched for more information, they got an error message saying the files were corrupted. This was not the first time Jin-Woo had heard complaints like this. Over the past few years, more and more historical records about the Grey Death seemed to disappear. When he asked consortium officials about it, they said it was normal data maintenance. Old files got corrupted and had to be removed. But Jin-Woo was starting to have doubts. He decided to do some research of his own. Using his security clearance, he accessed the station's database and searched for information about the plague. The official record said that Vallani, scientists had developed the cure using advanced quantum medicine. There was a brief mention of biological samples from various species, but nothing about humans. Specifically, Jin-Woo knew this was wrong. His father had been there. He had the scars on his arms from the genetic extraction procedures. But according to the official records, humans had played only a minor role in ending the crisis. On the inner worlds, Dr. Soo-Jin Han was making similar discoveries. She worked in the Great Archive on Vallani Prime, the most complete library in the galaxy. Her job was to organize historical documents and make them available to researchers. Soo-Jin had always been interested in the Grey Death period. Her grandmother had lived through it and told her stories about the human volunteers who sacrificed their health to save the galaxy. But when Soo-Jin tried to find documents to support these stories, she kept hitting walls. Files that should have existed were missing. Witness accounts had been edited to remove references to human contributions. Even video recordings seemed to have been altered. In one famous speech by a consortium leader, she could see the editing marks where words had been removed. The most disturbing discovery came when she found a folder labeled Historical Revision Project, Phase 7. Inside were instructions for systematically removing or altering documents related to human involvement in the Grey Death cure. The project had been running for 30 years. Su Jin printed copies of everything she could find and hid them in her apartment. She knew that what she was doing was dangerous, but she also knew it was necessary. Someone was deliberately erasing humanity's greatest moment from history. Meanwhile, Ambassador Ji-hoon Yoon was fighting a different battle in the Consortium Senate. He represented humanity's interests in the government, but it was a frustrating job. Every proposal he made for better treatment of human colonies was rejected or delayed. During one heated debate about mining quotas, Ji-hoon lost his temper. "My people saved this galaxy 50 years ago," he said to the assembled senators. "We shortened our own lives to create the cure for the Grey Death. The least you can do is give us fair trade agreements." The chamber fell silent. Then Senator Velthan of the Villani spoke up. "Ambassador Yoon, I understand that human pride leads you to exaggerate your species' role in past events, but spreading false historical claims does not help your cause." False claims? Ji-hoon could not believe what he was hearing. Millions of humans participated in the cure development. Dr. Hae-won Kim led the research team. "I have reviewed the historical records," Velthan replied calmly. "The cure was developed by consortium scientists using standard medical procedures. Humans may have provided some biological samples, but that is hardly the same as creating the cure." Other senators nodded in agreement. Some looked at Ji-hoon with pity, as if he was a child telling stories. He realized that they actually believed what they were saying. The lie had been told so many times that it had become truth. That night, Ji-hoon sent encrypted messages to Jin-woo and Su-jin. He had met both of them at conferences for humans working in consortium institutions. They were some of the few people in positions to access real information. The three of them began to share what they had learned. Su-jin sent copies of the documents she had found. Jin-woo provided security footage from mining stations that showed consortium agents removing historical displays about the Grey Death. Ji-hoon shared recordings of Senate debates where human contributions were dismissed or ignored. The pattern was clear. The consortium was not just forgetting humanity's sacrifice, they were actively erasing it. And they had been doing it for decades. Why? Su-jin asked during one of their secret video calls. Why would they want to hide what we did? Jin-woo had been thinking about this question for months. Because they cannot stand owing their lives to a primitive species, he said. It is easier to believe that they saved themselves. Ji-hoon nodded. And it justifies how they treat us now. If we were just minor participants in ending the plague, then we do not deserve equal status in the consortium. They realized they were not just dealing with historical revisionism. This was about power and control. By erasing humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization, the consortium could continue to treat humans as second-class citizens without feeling guilty about it. But the three of them also realized they were being watched. Consortium intelligence had been monitoring humans who asked too many questions about the past. Jin-woo's request for historical data had been flagged. Su-jin's access to certain archive sections had been quietly restricted. Ji-hoon's speeches in the Senate were being recorded and analyzed. They began to communicate in code and meet in secret locations. They discovered that other humans across the galaxy had been asking similar questions and making similar discoveries. A network was forming. People who remembered the truth and were willing to risk everything to preserve it. The consortium had made one mistake in their erasure program. They had assumed that humans would be easy to fool and control. They had forgotten that the species that saved the galaxy once was also capable of fighting back when pushed too far. Jin-woo looked out at the stars from his mining station and made a decision. The truth needed to be preserved no matter what the cost. His father and millions of other humans had sacrificed their lives to save these worlds. The least he could do was make sure their sacrifice was remembered. The galaxy wanted to forget what humanity had done for them. But humans would not let them forget. The real fight was just beginning. Commander Jin-woo Lee had been transferred to Mining Station Omega-7, the most remote outpost in human space. His superiors said it was a promotion, but Jinwoo knew it was punishment for asking too many questions. The station was 3 months' travel from the nearest consortium world, which made it perfect for what he was about to discover. The station manager was Captain Mi Young Cho, a quiet woman who ran supply missions between human colonies. Her ship, the Busan Runner, was old and unremarkable, exactly the kind of vessel that consortium inspectors ignored. What Jinwoo did not know was that Mi Young had been using her ship to carry more than just supplies. "Commander, I need to show you something," Mi Young said during his second week on the station. She led him to a storage room deep in the station's lower levels. Inside were dozens of data cores and storage devices hidden behind boxes of mining equipment. "What is all this?" Jinwoo asked. Mi Young activated one of the data cores. The holographic display showed original footage from the Gray Death Crisis, videos of Dr. Haewon Kim working in laboratories, recordings of human volunteers undergoing genetic procedures, and testimony from consortium leaders thanking humanity for their sacrifice. "We have been collecting this for 20 years, Mi Young said. "Every time the consortium deletes something from their databases, we try to save a copy. There are people like us on stations and colonies across human space, all working to preserve the truth." Jinwoo stared at the footage. He recognized some of the volunteers. They looked like older versions of people he knew, but their hair was gray and their faces were lined from the genetic procedures that aged them, decades and months. "How many people are involved in this?" he asked. "More than you might think," Mi Young said. "Dr. Sujin Han has been our main source of archived documents. Ambassador Ji Hoon-yoon provides intelligence from the Senate. But the real treasure is on Kepler Station." She explained that Professor Tae-ho Kim, one of the original scientists who worked with Dr. Haewon Kim, was still alive. Officially, he had died in a mining accident 15 years ago. In reality, he had faked his death with the help of the underground network and was now living in secret on a hidden research station. Professor Kim saw this coming, Mi Young continued. Even while they were developing the cure, he knew that the consortium would eventually try to take credit for it. He has been preparing for 50 years. 2 weeks later, Mi Young took Jinwoo to meet the professor. They traveled in the Busan Runner to a system that did not appear on any official star charts. Hidden in an asteroid field was a small research station, powered by solar collectors and shielded from detection. Professor Tae-ho Kim was in his 90s, but his mind was still sharp. The genetic procedures that had aged his generation prematurely had also given them longer lives in some ways. Their bodies were weak, but their brains remained clear. He greeted Jinwoo in a laboratory filled with equipment from the Gray Death era. "Welcome to the archive," Professor Kim said. "This is where we keep the real history." The station was larger than it appeared from outside. Tunnels carved into asteroids held storage facilities containing thousands of data cores, physical samples from the original plague, and even some of the original cure. Most importantly, it held the complete records of everything that had happened during the crisis. "We knew they would try to erase us," Professor Kim explained, as he showed Jinwoo through the facilities. The consortium could not bear the psychological burden of owing their existence to a primitive species. It was easier to rewrite history than to admit they needed our help. Jinwoo learned that the erasure was even more systematic than he had imagined. The consortium had not just deleted records, they had created false histories to replace them. Propaganda films showed Villani scientists developing the cure through pure intellectual superiority. Educational materials taught children that humans had played only a minor support role in the crisis. Even worse, the consortium was still using human biology for their research. The genetic changes that had saved the galaxy also made humans useful for developing new medical technologies. Consortium scientists studied human volunteers without telling them what they were really doing, claiming it was routine health monitoring. "They are still profiting from our sacrifice," Professor Kim said bitterly, "and they have convinced themselves that they deserve the credit." Dr. Sujin Han arrived at the station a few days later. She had been forced to flee Villani Prime when consortium security began investigating her archive research. She brought with her the most damaging evidence yet: internal memos from consortium leadership discussing the human problem. "Listen to this," she said, playing a recording from a secret meeting 20 years ago. "We cannot allow humans to believe they are our equals based on one historical event. If they think they saved us, they will demand equal treatment forever. Better to adjust the historical record to reflect the true balance of contributions. The recording was from Prime Speaker Vel Than, the current leader of the Consortium Senate. Her voice was calm and reasonable as she discussed erasing humanity's greatest achievement. Jinwoo felt sick listening to it. They are not just hiding what we did, they actually believe their own lies now. Some of them do, Professor Kim agreed. But the leaders know the truth. They just think it is better for galactic stability if humans remain grateful junior partners instead of demanding equals. The network faced a critical decision. For 20 years, they had focused on preserving the truth for future generations. But now they learned that the consortium was planning something called consolidation, a program to move all human populations to designated worlds where their history and culture could be more easily controlled. They are going to turn us into a reservation species, Mi-young said during a planning meeting. Isolated worlds where they can control what we learn and what we remember. Engineer Dalho Park, the great-grandson of the original Captain Dongmin Park, had been working undercover in consortium shipyards for years. He brought intelligence that made the situation even more urgent. The technology gap is not what they pretend it is, he reported. Much of their advanced technology is actually based on human innovations from the plague crisis. We leapfrogged several technological barriers while developing the cure, but they took credit for our discoveries. He showed them blueprints for consortium ships that used human-designed power systems and navigation computers. The primitive humans had actually been more innovative than their advanced allies, but this fact had been buried along with everything else. We have a choice, Professor Kim said as the group gathered in the main conference room. We can continue hiding and preserving the truth for some future generation that might be brave enough to act on it. Or we can risk everything and try to tell the galaxy what really happened. The decision was not easy. Exposing the truth would mean revealing the archive and putting everyone in the network at risk. The consortium would label them as terrorists and traitors. Some of them would probably die. But the alternative was watching humanity slowly fade into a controlled, dependent species that had forgotten its own greatness. Jinwoo thought about his father, who had died young so that aliens he would never meet could live. He thought about Dr. Hae-won Kim, who had given her life to save trillions of beings across the galaxy. He thought about all the humans who had sacrificed their futures so that others could have one. They died believing that their sacrifice would be remembered. He said finally, "We owe them more than just preservation. We owe them justice." The network began preparing for the most dangerous mission in human history. They were going to tell the galaxy the truth about the Grey Death, whether the galaxy wanted to hear it or not. The archive had preserved humanity's greatest moment. Now it was time to make sure the galaxy remembered it. Captain Mi-young Cho sat in the pilot's chair of the Busan runner and watched the countdown timer reach 0. In 30 seconds, every major communication network in the galaxy would receive the largest data dump in history. 50 years of hidden truth was about to be revealed. "Broadcasting now," said Jinwoo from the communications station. Around the galaxy, the archive's complete records began flooding into public networks. Video footage of human volunteers aging decades and months. Audio recordings of consortium leaders acknowledging humanity's sacrifice. Scientific data proving that humans alone could have developed the cure. Within minutes, emergency alerts were going out across consortium space. Official channels began broadcasting warnings about terrorist disinformation and human supremacist propaganda. But the data was spreading too fast to stop. On Vellani Prime Speaker Vel Than watched the crisis unfold in her command center. The carefully constructed narrative of the past 50 years was crumbling in real time. Citizens across the galaxy were seeing footage they had never been shown, hearing testimonies that had been erased from their histories. "Shut down all public networks," she ordered. "Declare a state of emergency and begin arresting human activists immediately." But the consortium's response only made things worse. When people saw their own government frantically trying to suppress historical evidence, they began asking why. Some species, particularly the honor-bound Karathi and the truth-seeking Zenthi, demanded explanations from their representatives. Elder Zothkran of the ancient Zenthari species was one of the first non-human leaders to speak publicly. His people lived for thousands of years and maintained independent historical records. When he testified before an emergency session of the Galactic Senate, his words carried tremendous weight. "I was present during the Grey Death crisis. the ancient being said. "I witnessed human volunteers sacrificing their genetic heritage to save species that barely acknowledge their existence. The records being revealed today match what I personally observed 50 years ago. The question is not whether humans are telling the truth. The question is why their truth has been hidden." Admiral Yeon-Soo Kang faced the most difficult decision of her military career. She commanded the 7th Fleet, 3 destroyers and a battlecruiser crewed mostly by humans who had joined consortium forces believing they were serving the civilization their ancestors had saved. Now she was being ordered to arrest the people who had revealed that truth. "Admiral, you have your orders," said Fleet Commander Velkos over the communication channel. "Arrest the terrorists who release this disinformation and destroy their hidden facilities." Yeon-Soo looked around her bridge at officers whose grandparents had died young to save the galaxy. She thought about the oath she had taken to serve the consortium with honor. Then she thought about what honor really meant. "I cannot carry out this order," she said calmly. "The evidence shows that humans are not terrorists spreading lies. They are victims trying to restore stolen history. My fleet will not participate in suppressing the truth." The defection of an entire fleet sent shockwaves through consortium command. Within hours, human colonies across the galaxy began declaring independence. Governors who had served loyally for decades suddenly found themselves leading rebel movements as their populations demanded justice. For 50 years of lies, engineer Dalho Park chose that moment to strike at the shipyards where he had worked for years. Using access codes he had carefully collected, he sabotaged the main construction facilities and broadcast his own revelations. The blueprints he shared showed how much consortium technology was actually based on human innovations from the plague crisis. "They did not just steal our credit," he announced, in a video message that spread across rebel networks. "They stole our inventions. The navigation systems, power cores, and medical equipment they use today, all of it came from human scientists working to save their lives. We were not just the cure for their plague. We were the foundation of their technological advancement." The revelation hit the galaxy like a second shockwave. Species that had always believed in consortium technological superiority suddenly learned that much of their progress came from the primitive humans they had been looking down on for 50 years. Dr. Seon-ho Lim, a human scientist working in secret consortium research facilities, added the final piece to the puzzle. He had discovered that the programs supposedly designed to help humans integrate into galactic society were actually meant to keep them dependent and intellectually stunted. They have been deliberately suppressing human education and technological development, he revealed in leaked documents. Training programs that claim to elevate human workers actually limit their learning to prevent them from realizing their full potential. They were afraid that if humans developed freely, we would surpass them. As human colonies united to form the Free Human Alliance, the galaxy found itself divided. Some species supported the consortium's harsh response, either out of loyalty or fear of change. Others, particularly those with strong honor codes or long memories, began questioning everything they had been told about the past. The Karathi warrior poets were among the first to switch sides. Their culture valued courage and sacrifice above all else, and the story of humanity's voluntary genetic destruction to save others resonated deeply with them. When Karathi fleets began protecting human colonies from consortium attacks, the conflict escalated from rebellion to full war. The Zenthi mathematicians reached similar conclusions through pure logic. They calculated the probability that humans could fabricate 50 years' worth of detailed historical evidence, and found it essentially impossible. Their decision to support the Free Human Alliance brought crucial technological expertise to the rebel cause. But the war was still hopeless for humanity. Admiral Yeon-Soo Kang's fleet won several early victories through superior tactics and desperate courage. But everyone knew they were vastly outnumbered. The consortium had thousands of ships and hundreds of worlds. The rebels had passion and truth on their side. But that would not be enough against overwhelming force. Prime Speaker Velthan addressed the consortium Senate as rebel fleets fought desperate battles across the Outer Rim. "This insurrection threatens the stability that has protected our civilization for millennia," she declared. "We cannot allow human terrorist propaganda to destroy the peace and order we have built." But her words rang hollow to many listeners. Video footage of human volunteers aging before their eyes was hard to dismiss as propaganda. Testimony from respected elders like Zothkran carried more weight than official denials. The truth had a power that 50 years of lies could not overcome. The tide of public opinion was turning, but slowly. The consortium still controlled most of the major worlds and trade routes. They had superior firepower and better supply lines. Most importantly, they had convinced many species that human equality would somehow threaten galactic stability. Captain Mi-Young Cho, now commanding a small fleet of converted freighters, knew that military victory was impossible. The Free Human Alliance was fighting for a principle, not territory. They needed to change hearts and minds, not just win battles. "We are not trying to conquer anyone," she broadcast to consortium worlds during a raid on a supply depot. "We just want the galaxy to remember what we did for them. We saved your children and grandchildren from becoming walking corpses. All we ask is that you acknowledge that fact and treat us as equals." The message spread through underground networks and rebel sympathizers. More and more beings across the galaxy began to question why humans were being treated as criminals for revealing their own history. The official explanation made less sense each day. As the war raged on, both sides began to prepare for a longer conflict than anyone had expected. The consortium had the advantage in firepower, but the rebels had something more powerful. A truth that could not be killed by weapons or suppressed by propaganda. The galaxy was about to learn that some debts could never be erased, no matter how hard people tried to forget them. The war was going badly for humanity. Admiral Yansu Kang stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched another human colony fall to consortium forces. Despite early victories and growing support from some species, the Free Human Alliance was losing. They simply did not have enough ships or soldiers to fight the entire galaxy. Her fleet had been reduced to hit-and-run attacks on supply lines, while consortium forces slowly reclaimed rebel worlds. Each victory cost them ships they could not replace, and soldiers whose families would never see them again. The dream of human equality was dying in the cold vacuum of space. Then Dr. Min-Ho Young made a discovery that changed everything. Working in hidden laboratories on the archive station, Dr. Young had been studying the original Gray Death samples that Professor Kim's team had preserved. What he found made his blood turn cold. The plague was mutating naturally, just as all viruses do over time. The cure that had saved the galaxy 50 years ago was becoming less effective. "The original cure will fail completely within 5 years," he reported to the rebel leadership during an emergency meeting. "And this new strain will be worse than the original. Much worse." He showed them computer models of how the mutated plague would spread. The new Gray Death would not just turn people into walking corpses. It would kill them within days. Worse, it seemed to be developing resistance to all known medical treatments. "Can you develop a new cure?" Jinwoo asked. Dr. Jung nodded grimly. "Yes, but only humans can do it. The genetic changes our people underwent 50 years ago gave us immunity to the new variants. We are the only species that can survive exposure long enough to study the plague and develop treatments." Captain Mi-Young Cho saw the opportunity immediately. "The galaxy needs us again," she said. "Just like before. But this time would be different. Instead of quietly sacrificing themselves for ungrateful aliens, humanity would use their unique position to demand justice. They would save the galaxy again, but only on their own terms." Mi-Young broadcast Dr. Jung's findings to every world in consortium space. The message was simple. A new plague was coming that would be worse than the original Gray Death. Only humans could develop a cure. But this time they wanted something in return. The announcement threw the galaxy into chaos. Some consortium hardliners, led by Prime Speaker Vel Than, refused to negotiate with terrorist blackmailers. They demanded that humans be forced to share any cure they developed, just as they had been forced to share everything else for 50 years. But other voices began to speak up. Elder Zothkran of the Zenthari called for immediate negotiations. "Humans saved us once at terrible cost to themselves," he reminded the Galactic Senate. "They have every right to demand fair treatment in exchange for saving us again." The debate became more urgent when the first cases of the new plague appeared on Outer Rim worlds. Consortium medical teams tried their most advanced treatments, but nothing worked. The victims died within hours, their bodies consumed by a virus that seemed designed to destroy all higher life forms. As panic spread through consortium space, Admiral Kang's forces secured several key systems, not to conquer them, but to protect them from the spreading plague. Human ships became islands of safety in a galaxy that was starting to remember why it needed humanity. Professor Kim, now over 100 years old, but still sharp, made one final contribution to the cause. He released personal recordings from the original Gray Death Crisis, messages from Dr. Haewon, Kim and other volunteers explaining why they chose to sacrifice their future for people who barely knew humans existed. "We do this not because we expect gratitude," Dr. Kim's recorded voice said in the final message before her death. "We do this because it is right. Because when you have the power to save lives, you use it. We only hope that someday, when the fear passes and life returns to normal, people will remember that we were here." The recording played on every human ship and rebel-controlled world. It also found its way into consortium territory, where it was seen by billions of beings who had never heard the real story of their salvation. The emotional impact was devastating. Here was a young human woman, visibly aging from the genetic procedures that would save the galaxy, asking only to be remembered. Her words made it impossible to view humans as terrorists or troublemakers. They were clearly the heroes of their own story. Prime Speaker. Velthan faced growing pressure from her own people as the new plague spread to core worlds. Vellani citizens who had never questioned their government's version of history began demanding answers. When Vellani children started dying from the new Gray Death, the abstract political debate became personal. The crisis reached its peak when the plague hit Vellani Prime itself. Consortium medical facilities were overwhelmed within days. The most advanced civilization in the galaxy found itself helpless against a mutated version of the same plague that humans had cured 50 years ago. Dr. Jung and his team, working aboard human ships in orbit around the dying world, successfully developed a treatment for the new strain, but they did not immediately share it. Instead, Captain Mi-young Cho made one final broadcast to the galaxy. 50 years ago, "My people gave their lives to save you from the Gray Death," she said, standing on the bridge of her flagship while consortium worlds burned with plague below. "We asked for nothing except recognition of what we had done. Instead, you erased us from history and treated us like servants. Now the plague has returned, and once again, only humans can stop it. We have the cure. We will share it freely as we did before, but this time you will remember what we did. You will acknowledge our sacrifice, and you will treat us as the equals we have always been." The demands were simple: full restoration of historical records, equal representation in galactic government, reparations for 50 years of exploitation, and a guarantee that human history would never again be suppressed. In exchange, humanity would share the new cure and help rebuild the galaxy. Prime Speaker Velthan had no choice. With her own people dying and other consortium worlds demanding action, she agreed to negotiate. The ceremony was broadcast live across the galaxy as consortium leadership formally acknowledged humanity's role in ending both plague crises. "We recognize that humans sacrificed their genetic heritage to save galactic civilization," Velthan said, her voice heavy with defeat. "We acknowledge that this sacrifice was deliberately erased from historical records. We commit to restoring the truth and ensuring that humanity receives the recognition and equality they have always deserved." Dr. Jung shared the cure formula immediately, just as humanity had promised. Within weeks, the new plague was contained and treatments were being distributed to every world in the galaxy. Lives were saved, civilizations were preserved, and the galaxy was reminded once again of who had truly saved them. But this time was different. This time, humanity retained control of the cure production. The species that had once been treated as junior partners now found themselves essential to galactic survival. No one could erase their contribution because everyone depended on their continued cooperation. 10 years later, Admiral Mi-young Cho stood on the observation deck of New Terra Station, humanity's new capital in the heart of consortium space. Through the windows, she could see ships from hundreds of worlds docking at the station's ports. But now, human ships were among the largest and most advanced. The memorial fleet passed by on its weekly patrol, a collection of vessels dedicated to ensuring that historical truth was never again suppressed. Each ship carried complete archives of human history and was crewed by beings from across the galaxy who had volunteered to protect the memory of humanity's sacrifice. Dr. Minho Jung had established the Institute for Crisis Medicine, where the galaxy's best minds worked together to prepare for future threats. The Institute's research had already prevented 3 potential plagues and developed treatments for dozens of diseases. Its motto, inscribed in 100 languages, read, "Never forgotten, never again." But perhaps the most important change was in humanity itself. The species that had once sacrificed everything for others had learned to value themselves. They remained generous and willing to help, but they would never again allow their contributions to be erased or their sacrifice to be forgotten. Professor Kim had lived long enough to see the truth restored and humanity take its rightful place among the stars. Before his death, he recorded one final message that was played at the dedication of the memorial archive. "We saved them twice," the old man said, his voice weak but proud. The first time they forgot because forgetting was easier than gratitude. The second time they remembered because forgetting became impossible. The galaxy learned that some debts can never be erased, they can only be honored. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about the cost of forgetting. When humanity repaid a debt, the price of ingratitude was always higher than the value of respect. And now, as they faced an uncertain future together, all species understood that some sacrifices deserved to be remembered forever.